everyone, Richard here for another quick Blender tutorial, and today we're looking at basic animation within a scene. So just wanted to touch base on some of the tools, like using the curve tools, camera tracking, parenting, and looking at a bit of motion blur as well. So say I've got this little drone here, and I've just created a simple little curved path using the drawing option as well. So I mean, there's different ways you can do this. Of course, you can also select your drone, move it forward, add a keyframe, move it forward again, add a keyframe, do the rotation. But of course, that takes a bit of time. It's fine if you're doing simple things like moving your camera back and forth and that, but if you wanted like a spaceship or an object to go through like a canyon or something quite complex, we can use the curve options as well, which is very handy, which is what I've done here. So if I press this animate now, you see that my drone is just going in and out of these little pillars. It's more like a little test, nothing too fancy, but I've also got my camera here that's also tracking the drone, so we get different nice little movement, to be fair. So if I go to like 0 for example, zoom in a bit, go back, and then you can see that my camera tracks it quite nicely as well. And of course you can add multiple cameras and do different keyframes and cutscenes, which is quite nice. So, but if we go into full render view, let's see what it looks like. And of course I've added some motion blur as well. So you can't really see the motion blur as much on this, but if you rendered it you would see it. So if I quickly did an F12 now, you would see like the motion blur to get this more nice cinematic effect. And I've also added like the reflections options and the bloom option, currently using Eevee, not cycles, so because I find it quite nice for this little task here. So what we're going to do first is just delete the areas that we don't want. So that's all the keyframes, the curve, the camera, and all that good stuff, and also disable some properties down here. So make sure in object mode, just select our curve option, just delete that, and our camera as well, and just delete that. So, and of course we've still got our timeline, so just select all your keyframes and just delete them as well. Move our drone up so we can see it, and as you can see on the floor I've got this nice reflection happening as well. So, but if you want the reflections on, just make this basic scene, just go on to render properties and just turn on screen space for reflection. Got using bloom, and I'm also using a bit of motion blur, but I'll show you it on and off and how to change the shutter. If you've got a good understanding of DSLR cameras and photography, you'll know how motion blur works, because if you move your hand in front of your face, yeah, you're going to get motion blur. Nothing is ever sharp or straightforward, especially if your blinds are back like I am. So first of all, just make sure other options are deleted as well. So there's a followed path that needs to be deleted, and there's nothing else in our scene. Good. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, you could, I mean, I'm currently doing this at 100 frame because I'm just doing a little test scene here, but you could, like example, if you press I, location, add your first keyframe, move it forward, press I again, add another location, sorry, not bad. Make sure you move your timeline forward as well. Press I, add another location, backspace it. Sorry about that. So we'll move it forward, add location, forward again, add location. If we go back, and you could do it that way and just do it step by step, but it just takes a lot of time. It's all right, like I said, it's all right if you're doing basic movements like moving a camera forward or some random effect, but that's not how we're going to do this. So we'll move our drone back. So we're going to use the curve options. So if you shift and we'll go back to shade editor, you can see everything quite nicely. I've also got cavity on as well. So if you go on to this option here, turn on cavity, it allows you to see the options quite nicely. If you look at my drone, for example, so if I turn cavity on and off, this makes it look nicer as well, and see the details. So anyway, back to the subject. So what I'm going to do is go to the top view, make sure you're quite high up so you can see everything, because otherwise if you try and do this, you're constantly zooming in and out and it's just going to be a pain. So you go Shift and A, down here where it says curves, I'm going to create a path. So it's going to create a little path for us already. So we're going to edit mode, so go to tab, and we're going to delete this path, delete the vertices, and then down here we've got draw option. So we've got a drone here, so we're going to draw just a little path. go back to object mode, just bring it up, make sure we're quite up, because we're going to be crossing across the floor. So, but of course our path is quite boring, it's just straight lines. Well, I know we've got a couple of bends here, but we want to make it a bit more interesting. So go back to object mode, use our movement, select a point, and just start manipulating it. And you see now got the path is a bit more interesting now. We've got these little loops. Imagine like a little roller coaster. And you can use this as well. So if you wanted to do some basic animation of a train going around a track, or a car racing around a track, or a ship flying through a canyon, you can use the same method for that. You just have to take your time with it. But of course, nothing's going to happen yet, because what we need to do now is parent our drone to this path. So for that we need to use our add modifiers. So if we go back to object mode, select our drone. Not bad. So on this option here it says object constraint properties. I'm going to add an object. So with this one I'm going to add follow path. And of course here's our options here as well. So we're going to add our target. So by default it usually finds this quite well, but if you've got quite a lot happening within your scene, you can also use the eyedropper and select the path as well if there's something particular. But of course your drone goes to a different location, so all you need to do then, and when it says object properties, which is obviously our drone, we need to change the location to 0, 0 and 0, and that's perfectly aligned now with our path. It's not over here all over the place. So, but of course if I press enter, nothing's going to happen, because what we need to do next now is animate it. So on here it says animate path. So if you click on animate path, it will do this little bit. Now if I press enter, the drone will now animate, but of course it's only facing in one direction. So this is when you start applying keyframes and rotations and all that good stuff. So same again, go to the top view, go back, make sure you always go back as well so it updates the system. So for this, I mean, you could use the rotation, add keyframes, but you're better off using your transforms and your rotation. Depends what you want to do, to be fair. So use your timeline to go forward. I always find that the best way of going forward and back. But for your rotation, just use your X rotation. So first of all, let's straighten up our drone. So and then we press I. You could use rotation, but for this just use location and also rotation, and this will automatically apply it to both. So just move forward with your drone, and of course we've got this little bend here, just a little short one. So using the X rotation, just bring it across a little bit. Same again, once you've done the change, make sure you apply the keyframe. So press I, location and rotation. You see now, and then do the same, and then you just basically just do the same all the way around. Of course I'm doing this fairly quick, but with yourselves take your time, because you might have more complex paths. And make sure you're looking where you're going as well, because if you accidentally change something else, it's going to change the outcome of your drone, especially for scaling. So if you're thinking all of a sudden nothing's happening because you're accidentally changing your scale, then you'll find that your drone or your object has been retransformed or warped. So just make sure you take your time. I don't do a lot of animation myself. This is still a learning curve, but it's an opportunity to start bringing your objects and your 3D models to life and start creating more complex scenes. Guess a lot of people will create nice still renders, but it's also nice to bring your renders to life. So also I'm just going to speed this up a bit because you get the general idea. So again, I'm just pressing I to open up the keyframe panel. Oop. That's what I'm saying, you've got to be careful with that. Go too far, things start going weird. So I'm sure there's other ways as well, animating or following paths. But this is how I've been doing certain things, and it's worked quite well for me so far. So, and of course, if we look at our top view again to make sure we're quite happy, because this curve here is quite bendy. So, go back to update it. And let's go to our side view. So, yeah. Yeah, it works quite well. And of course, this is only like a little test run to give you an idea how to like animate a basic scene. So you might have a little drone flying down a corridor, and then you could do some compositing and then apply the same scene within a hallway that you're working in, which is something I'm going to be testing out. So yeah, I'm quite happy with that right now. So obviously, if we go into like full render view, drone's nicely rendered and some basic stuff, so with some reflections, some basic lighting. But of course, what we need to do now is add a camera. So if we go back here, so I'm going to apply a standard camera. Let's move it over here. Just pick up a location, because I'm not going to have the camera move. I'm going to have it track the object, so it's following it like a CCTV camera. So one way of doing this as well, you can go back to object mode. So add object to, and then we're going to do track to, and of course we're going to track the drone. And of course, as you can see, I've got quite a lot happening in here. So of course I can select the drone, or I can use the eyedrop. And now the camera will follow the drone exactly. And of course, you can do this with multiple cameras and swap between different frames. So if I go to click 0, it'll automatically go to your camera, and you can see now, and you get this nice little cinematic effect going on. So if I bring it to this frame, for example, if you press 12, do a quick render, I'm getting some nice motion blur because I've still got motion blur enabled, and of course this makes it much more cinematic and much more believable. But if I go to our render properties, turn motion blur off, but press F12 again, everything's going to be in sharp focus, and it's not as powerful. So experiment with the motion blur. So again, so same with shutter. So if I have the shutter all the way up, press F12, it's quite strong. Just bring it down, so say about 25. Press it again. Yeah, we're still getting some motion blur, but it's not as strong. So it's just a case of experimenting, so it works. I think I'll stick with 60. I think that's quite nice. Yeah, and then after that, once you're happy with that, it's just a case of animating it. So I'm also using HDRI as well. And so I've got my HDRI, I'm using the lighting from the HDRI, I'm also using the reflections as well, but I've got it currently transparent. So if you click on render properties, so go down to filmic, and as you can see, my HDRI is there. So always use a HDRI because it's nice to have that realistic reflections and lighting as well. Because I'm only using a basic, which one I'm using now? Using a point light, so which I don't think is really doing a lot. So, oh yeah, we've got there. But yeah, and that's the basic introduction to like how to do a basic animation within a scene. So feel free to experiment with this. Just add a plane, couple of pillars, and whatever object that you have, just experiment, see what happens. You can't go wrong. And if it goes wrong, try again. The best way to learn is just keep going. The more the practice, the better you get. Well, hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much.